Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Grandmaster Shaymin and today we have another anime review. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these, but it's finally back. And today we're going to be doing a brand new animation that just finished last anime season called Dorei-ku the Animation.
座りもなく笑えるような心が欲しい
Dorei-ku the Animation is set in modern-day Japan, where a device has just come out that basically can turn people into slaves. At this point, it's just sort of a rumor. Most people don't even know of its true existence, and even by the end, it doesn't seem like a lot of people actually have the items in question. But this device amplifies a person's sense of obligation. Thus, if they lose a game, they feel indebted to the winner and will do anything that the winner tells them to within their own power. There are a couple of rules as to what they can and cannot do, but all things considered, they essentially become that person's slave. The only way to activate this is to engage in a contest with another person wearing said device and winning. The winner will be able to do anything, will be able to force the person who lost to do basically anything within their power to assist the master or even injure the person who is now the slave. Um, these devices, I believe they're known as SCMs, are just on the rise and not a lot of people know about them. But the main character, Aya Arakawa, somehow finds her way to Yuga Ota. And Yuga Ota has a plan to try and see how far his will can take him in these contests, to see if he can't find a bunch of slaves and basically become not exactly powerful, but just see how far it can take him. At the beginning, this seems like a pretty good idea, but as things progress, we get a little bit more of a complication. There are two other factions, all vying for different ideals. Some are vying for the ideal to get as many slaves as possible and basically enslave the entire world to do their bidding. Another one, I mean, basically that's exactly what everybody wants to do, at least at the beginning. And then you kind of see what people would do in this type of situation. And I believe it's sort of accurate. You know, if people had this power to engage in a contest with someone, and if they win, they enslave them, the kind of horrible, horrid things that they could do and force that person to accomplish would be unbelievable and sadistically gross. The fact of the matter is that Aya Arakawa takes a little bit of offense to this. At first, she just seems like she's just along with the ride. Yuga believes to want to release everyone from this slavery and stop this craziness that humanity should not be able to do. But as time passes, Yuga seems to kind of stray away from this and want to basically take over the world in a sense, at least to some degree. But Aya, of course, doesn't want this and tries to escape. Needless to say, this leads into a whole mess of things as the three factions try and knock out each other and take over their slaves to basically enslave everyone who has one of these SCMs. The characters in this show are relatively wishy-washy. There's not a lot of time in this show, obviously, because it is a 12-episode series, to get all roughly 30 characters that play an important role into this enough time, enough screen time to really make the viewer care about them. There's a huge issue in character development over the course of this. We do see a couple of characters get a lot of time, but very, very few, and it's hard to be expected to care too much about them. But what it does do a great job of is showing the kind of inhumane acts people will do if they have this kind of power. And I have no doubt if this kind of power was given in the real world today, that this exact sort of situation would play out. I know for a fact that it would. The biggest issue that I have is a lot of character motivations that seem to be completely independent of their character. It almost seems like characters just kind of go with the flow and do their own thing. And we got to miss a lot of time where suddenly a character will do something completely different. For instance, the main character. For example, the main character would act this one way, and then all of a sudden there's this huge split where we go and see a different side of the story from a different character's perspective, and then we come back and she's doing completely different things and acting completely different to how she was before. Even if her entire goal is the same, her way of going about it is different, and we never really see how that thought process came to be. The animation itself is all right, about what you'd expect from this day and age, but at the same time, nothing really too fantastic. There are a lot of interesting kind of psychological ideals in this, so it's not like it's extremely dependent upon the animation, but it definitely didn't wow me or go over the top with any of that kind of thing. The soundtrack itself wasn't all that great either. There wasn't really much to add to the show itself with its soundtrack. In fact, you could barely even tell much of the time that it was even there. Um, Overall, the show has a lot of issues, in my opinion, between character development, a lot of plot holes, and things that are extremely convenient to the plot itself, along with a lot of shifts in the storyline that don't really add up, all things considered. You also miss a lot of points in the show where slaves switch masters, and you don't see it until afterwards, just to add that kind of plot twist to it when it really doesn't make any sense. So, all things considered, this show it really has its own audience. I personally didn't hate it. It was pretty decent. It had a lot of good points that need to be made about society as a whole. However, it's not something completely unique that you get here and nowhere else. And even though the idea, the story, is on its own independent path, the execution was very lacking in that regard, and there was a lot more that it could have done to make the story and the characters a lot better and a lot more relatable. So, all things considered, I wouldn't say not to watch it, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorite shows. If I had to give it a rating on a scale of 10, it would probably be rated about a 6.5, which, conveniently enough, I believe is the actual rating it got on my anime list. If I just check this real fast, 6.11. So I'm sitting in about the same category as most people. The idea itself, again, interesting, but the execution was rather lacking. This show does have both a dub and the sub. The voice acting was alright, about what you'd expect. I didn't really feel a whole hell of a lot from it. It does have some very adult themes, so I would not recommend anyone under the age of about 15 to watch it. It does have some explicit language, as well as um, some very explicit themes, both in terms of violence and in terms of nudity. But it does get the point across that it's trying to make, so I can't really fault it for that. It's not the kind of stuff that you'd see in, like, your generic slutty romance. It's legitimately hardcore, uh, you know, very it gets the psychological kind of and it it gets the psychological feel down to a T. So, as for recommendations for this show, I'm only going to give two that come to mind. There's one that I would have to say is Kakeguri. Um, the show about kind of gambling in it's not exactly again one of my favorite shows of all time. But it is sharing a kind of similar sense in terms of the gaming aspect turning out to be, something that is a lot more than, what it seems. The psychological aspect, the it's not just gaming, it's a lot more than that, and it's got those really adult themes to it. The other is probably No Game No Life. It's a lot less serious. It's not a horror or anything like that, but everything is dictated by games, and you get the idea that in No Game No Life, you make a bet before the game, and the bet has to come true thanks to the 10 pledges. And this one, you legitimately become a slave to the person that beats you in a game. So those two are probably my anime recommendations, though albeit No Game No Life is a lot softer, it's a lot more comical, it's not in the psychological kind of dramatic fashion like Dorei-ku is, though Kakigure is in that sort of sense, and it also has those kind of adult themes to it, as well as where you really don't want to lose or something bad will really really happen to you. So that's about all the time we have for this episode. So make sure you click that thumbs up button down below for me because you already know your support is greatly appreciated. And we'll see you all in the next one.